Hello again. In this short video, we'll talk about cell surfaces. This is material from Chapter 6. So let's get us to our slideshow. The surfaces of cells. So some cells have, outside of their plasma membrane, a cell wall. Now, can you think of organisms that have cell walls? Well, animal cells don't, but plants do, and so do fungi. These would be secretions outside of the plasma membrane, and so do a lot of protists, so maybe many protists, like algae, for example, and many prokaryotes, bacteria, and archaea, okay? But the cell walls of plants and fungi and protists and prokaryotes, they're different in their structure. What does it look like? What is the structure of a cell wall in plants? That's what we're going to focus on. So let's take a look at the next slide. Okay, this is a little bit hard to orient to. So at the bottom here, we're looking at a set of 5 or 6 plant cells, right? And what are the big blue blob inside those plant cells? Central vacuoles, good job. The wall itself then is drawn kind of in big up here, right? So we kind of have 2 walls coming together, connecting adjacent plant cells as well. But when we look at a cell wall, the cell wall can vary in size from 0.1 micrometers to several micrometers in width. The picture here shows a really thick cell wall. And the cell walls are made up of fibers that are polysaccharides. And the primary polysaccharide, we're going back to Chapter 5, is cellulose. Cellulose makes up the primary structure of cell walls. All right. So when a plant grows, it first lays down a primary cell wall, and the primary cell wall is thin and pretty flexible. Okay. Then the second thing it lays down is a much thicker, rigid secondary cell wall. Now, not all plant cells have this rigid secondary cell wall. The secondary cell wall provides a lot of strength and support, and it is made up of lignified, that means kind of solidified, lignified cellulose. Okay? But between the cells, there have to be kind of gaps in the cell wall for materials to flow, for ions and nutrients and hormones and things, and those gaps are called plasmodesmata. Gaps between, so they would be actual channels or gaps between the 2 cells. You can see tiny little dots here that are the plasmodesmata that connect the cytoplasm of one cell to the cytoplasm of another, so materials can pass back and forth between them. Why do you think cell walls are important? In plants, cell walls do a number of things. They can be protective. They definitely can provide support for the plant. So what happens in a plant cell is the central vacuole fills up with water and pushes against the cell wall. The central vacuole cannot fill up too much. The cell wall will push back and prevent the plant cell from bursting under hypotonic conditions. But what that does is when we've got the central vacuole pushing against the cell wall, we get some turgor pressure that provides rigidity or strength for the support for the cell wall. Another important function of cell walls is they provide a mechanism for selective entry of materials into and out of the cell walls. Now, animal cells do not have cell walls, but they do have something that's worth talking about, and that is the extracellular matrix. So surrounding the animal cell, so here's our animal cell with its nucleus and genetic material, Out here on the outside of the plasma membrane are a set of molecules. Right? Those molecules are considered the extracellular matrix. And that set of molecules is sometimes called the biological glue of animal cells. Or we sometimes say it's the physical environment in which the animal cells live. Sometimes we say the extracellular matrix is the anchorage, so cells get anchored to it, or it acts as scaffolding for cells, for structure. When we look at this extracellular matrix, it's made up of all sorts of molecules, proteins and sugars and some lipids that are secreted by the cell and extend outward into the environment. And then we'll take a look at a picture of that, and we'll look at some functions of the ECM as well. So here's just a picture of some of the molecules that are part of the extracellular matrix. Here's our plasma membrane, the phospholipid bilayer. These purple blobs here, of course, represent proteins. Some of them are spanning the membrane, others of them aren't. This is the inside of the cell down here. Out here, we've got all sorts of interesting molecules, collagen and fibronectins and polysaccharides and glycoproteins, a lot of complex molecules that make up that extracellular matrix. Okay, so what does the ECM do? It seems to have many overlapping functions, and researchers are getting more and more excited about the extracellular matrix. It used to be people didn't really think much about it, but now it seems to have so many important functions that it's worth studying. So the first thing that the ECM can do is it can provide cell-to-cell adhesion. So cells stick together, and cells sticking together are called, they're anchored, right? We use that language. And cells need to be anchored to their appropriate tissue for them to thrive and grow. Typically, cells that are not anchored, that become dislodged from their tissue, will eventually commit suicide. There's a name for that. It's called cell apoptosis, or cell suicide. There are some exceptions to this. Cancer cells, when they become unanchored, can travel to a distant part of the body and keep dividing and keep growing. But that's unusual. That's not normal. Okay, so cell-to-cell adhesion, and the extracellular matrix varies from tissue to tissue, and so each tissue has its own extracellular matrix, so it gives specificity for the cell, what tissue it's in. And this is the fun one, the extracellular matrix regulates the behavior of the cell. This seems strange. The outside molecules regulate what's happening inside. And we get regulation of things like, hey, the cell needs to grow or to metabolize, or it might need to change shape, or might need to communicate with other cells. How does this work? This is the exciting part, right? So down here, in the cell, down here, we have the nucleus. We usually think of the nucleus as kind of the center of the cell that directs all of the behavior of the cell. But it turns out that molecules called integrins interact, those are proteins in the membrane, interact with the extracellular matrix and can receive information from it and send that information via parts of the cytoskeleton to the nucleus. And that information might tell the nucleus, hey, it's time to grow now, it's time to divide now, or hey, we need to change shape, or we need to communicate with a different cell in a different way, so we need to make some hormone now, those kinds of things. So the extracellular matrix is looking like it's pretty important for how the cell behaves. And those are the functions of the extracellular matrix. And that's the end of this video.